We're broadcasting now.
So good afternoon all. My name's Adam Nixon. We're about to get started shortly at 12. I can see a lot of people coming in, so thank you for joining us. People are streaming in as we speak. We're going to try and aim, we're getting some very good attendance already, a little bit early, which is great to see. We'll do some introductions shortly. I might take this opportunity to do a little bit of housekeeping, and excuse me, I'll probably repeat myself as people continue to come in right up to the start time of 12. For those that aren't aware, this session will be recorded. And so you'll get access to the recording should you wish to look at that at your own leisure later. People are still streaming in at the moment, so welcome to the new people. We've had a fantastic response, so I think collectively there was 122 odd registrations, which is a great indication of how topical cybersecurity is in this country at the moment. Through the course of the presentation today, we're going to try and keep on time. One of the functions where we're going to use is the Q&A function. So we really want this to be as interactive as we possibly can. So we would encourage you to use the Q&A function if you have any questions. We'll sort of address those questions in two ways. If it's something we can do whilst the presentation is occurring, we'll address those questions. Otherwise, there is a Q&A session or section of the presentation commencing at 12:40. So we will try and get to all questions posted today. Having done a few of these, there probably will be a lot of questions coming in. We're also going to use some polls through the course of today's presentation. And we would highly encourage you to complete those polls. They'll come up fairly regularly throughout the presentation. So we're still getting a lot of people streaming in. We've got really good attendance already. We might give it another 30 seconds and see if we can get started on time here. Again, there is two parts to this today. There is a formal sort of presentation. We'll do a very quick introduction at the start. We've got a presentation from a very versed gentleman by the name of Jay Ryerse here, who's the bulk of the presentation. Then we're going to move to a Q&A section at 12:40. So people are still, I'm watching the attendees joining as we speak, so welcome. A little bit of housekeeping again for the final time. This will be recorded. If you haven't used Zoom before, there is a couple of ways to utilize the platform. I would encourage you, if you can, to use two screens. You can sort of spread a lot of the faces you're seeing on screen across those. We are going to do polls again. And again, the session will be recorded today. Last point, we would also encourage you to stay on mute until a point where we reach the Q&A. I think on that note, I might get started here. We've got some good attendance already, and there's still people streaming in, but I think in the interest of getting started and getting you out of here, we might do some introductions. So I think probably firstly, this session has been brought to you by the Security Collective. The Security Collective is the combination or the formation of a number of companies. Those companies you're seeing on screen at the moment: OPC IT, Kaine Mathrick Tech, Subnet, and Core Technology Partners. It's an interesting sort of state of affairs. We're all competitors across, Melbourne, Sydney, South Australia, Canberra, but we sort of came together in the interest of educating SMB businesses in this country and offering a layer of protection that we don't feel is as attainable as it should be. We've got some great presentations today, some real heavy hitters, and some great panelists, which we're going to go through in a moment. But I think what I'd like to do is introduce some of the key people from each of those companies who have put this on for you today. Let's start with Brett Norton from OPC. I might do a quick introduction, get him to say a few words.
Thanks, Adam. Good morning, everybody. Yes, Brett Norton from OPC IT here in Canberra.
we've been we've been in the IT business now for over 35 years and certainly managed IT support for the last 20. But in the last few years with COVID and the changes in the economic environment, we've seen massive changes and nothing more. In all those years, the changes have been more significant over the past 12 to 18 months with cybersecurity. So we're delighted to be here today, and we're available to assist you with your cybersecurity and your training as we move forward. So thanks, Adam.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brett. I think I'd like to introduce Matt Dixon from Kaine Mathrick Tech.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Matt Dixon. I'm the Sales Director here at Kaine Mathrick Tech. And on behalf of the directors, Brad and Scott and myself, we'd like to personally thank all the loyal clients and obviously other business owners and leaders that have joined today for our webinar. By way of a brief introduction, Kaine Mathrick Tech is a Melbourne-based managed IT and cybersecurity services provider, very, very strong on valuing people and our relationships first. Over our sort of 10-year journey, we've now partnered with about 100 businesses and have continued to evolve and now adding further value and strengthening businesses' security posture through cybersecurity practices. So it's great to see all these people and obviously a lot of people, interested parties joining today. So I hope you get a lot of benefit and look forward to speaking to a great deal of you post the event. Thanks, Adam.
Good on you, Matt. Thanks so much. Brett Lodge from Subnet.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam. For those that don't know me, my name is Brett Lodge. I'm the Managing Director of Subnet. We've been working with clients from our offices in Metro or regional South Australia for over 21 years. Like our security collective partners across the country, we kicked off our security journey many years ago and look to provide strategy and support for those businesses that need to enhance the skill set or capability to protect themselves. So in Subnet's case, with the focus on managed services, we run our service desk 24 hours a day to help support clients that are multi-region, have extended trading hours, or nowadays just trying to support their end users, working from home when it suits them. So in short, if you need to get access to something at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday or at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, we're kind of there to take your call. I think for us, now, unfortunately, as hackers don't really have work hours, that team that we've built up over the last few years are really working closely with key security vendors and agencies to ensure that your information stays secure around the clock. And I think that's kind of highlighted recently with some of those recent zero-day attacks for Exchange and things like that. So using our teams to be able to patch, update, and protect the data when it needs to be done is kind of a real focus for us. I think the other thing which I'll just quickly touch on before I hand back is certainly the consulting team as well. So like most of us on the call, having to deal with or having to put in a lot of security policies, whether they're aligned to NIST or ISO 27001 is pretty critical to that. So yeah, I guess just remember, you don't need to go alone when it comes to IT or security. Just reach out to us or one of the security collective partners across the country, and we're definitely keen to help. But yeah, that's it from me, and hope you enjoy the content.
Thanks very much, Brett. And last but not least, Steve Pearce from Core Technology Partners.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Excuse me. Firstly, thanks to everyone for giving up your time and attending today. So my name's Steve Pearce. I'm from Core Technology Partners. So we're a Sydney-based MSP with a heavy specialisation in cybersecurity risk assessment and remediation. I look forward to engaging with you guys throughout the session today. Thanks, Adam.
Fantastic. Now, Jay, I'm going to throw over to you in a moment. I want to acknowledge again some panelists who we'll hear more from a little bit later, which is Adam Hines, a director at Aether Insurance, and Dudley Knelle from Gadens Lawyers. So thank you for your contributions today, gentlemen. We will hear from more and do a little bit better introduction shortly. Jay, do you still have control? I think I may have stolen control from you.
I believe that I do. Let's see what happens here when I click the button.
What we're going to do before Jay gets started here, in the interest of giving Jay a feel for the audience, we've got a really great attendance. I can see that now. We're going to do a quick poll. And get the many people that have joined us today just to give a feel for the audience. So I might get Steve to launch the very first poll for us. And as you can see, now one thing I want to be very clear on here is these polls are anonymous. They are anonymous. We're not going to use any of this information. We do understand that some of these questions are very sensitive. We're just trying to get a feel for the audience that have joined, and I can see, thank you so much. We've already got 41% of you have contributed, rising quickly. That's fantastic, really getting a great response here. We will share the results in a moment. But for those of you, I'm sure that you can see it, have you had or do you know of a company that has had any type of cyber incident? And again, every poll today is anonymous and that data will not be used. We've still got some answers trickling in. We're at 82%. We might leave it there, Steve, and I'll get you to share those results. Pretty interesting, Jay.
It's actually very consistent to what we see around the world. It's not unique to any one market. We typically do see that about 65% of the businesses have suffered through some sort of cyber attack in a previous year. So I'm saddened that it's that high of a number, but I'm also glad that this audience is here and ready and willing to have those conversations.
Great, Steve. So I'll get you to close that off. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. That was fantastic. Really got, I think it was well 90% participation. So on that note, just to get into the presentation, I'm going to throw over to Jay Ryerse. Jay Ryerse, who I didn't acknowledge at the very start, is a very, very educated man who's been in the cyberspace for a long time, specializes on protecting networks and currently works for Connectwise, which is a global organization. And a great friend to the Security Collective here. So thank you, Jay. I might throw over to you.
All right, Adam, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for being here today and spending some time with us. It's fascinating for us as a provider that works with lots of partners around the world to see how this group of service providers came together to provide a higher level and a smarter level of service, for their clients in your marketplace. So I'm Jay Ryerse. I'm VP of Cybersecurity Initiatives. I'm actually based in Tampa, Florida. So I'm coming to you from the East Coast of the US right now. I hope that's okay. But on that topic, well, let's talk about some things that are happening out there and what we're hearing from business owners. One of the things that we did last year, we actually did this back in June of July last year, so kind of mid-COVID, early release. We actually surveyed over 700 businesses from around the world, including many right there in Australia. And we heard some fascinating numbers from that audience. When we're talking to the small business owners, 92% of them said that they would look for a new service provider to get the right cybersecurity. See, cybersecurity has become more important than even IT services for many, many business owners. And it's a key part of all the things that are happening out there. That you also told us that you're not afraid to pay for the right service as long as it makes sense for you. And there's just lots of fascinating numbers and information out there. I won't go through all the stats. There's certainly no value in that. But as we start to understand what's happening in the marketplace, and what's really occurring out there, I want to kind of give you what we're hearing from business owners. And it's probably similar to what's on your mind, but let's make sure that we align there. So first off, 60% of the SMBs out there are investing more in cybersecurity in an effort to reduce risk. Right? Seems pretty obvious, right? That's not a hard one to offset. 59%, you can get this, 59% predict that they will outsource all or most of their cybersecurity activities within 5 years. So if you're on the call today and you're in IT, and maybe you provide IT services for the business that you're in, and you're leveraging one of the partners on the call today to help provide additional resources, in most cases, we're going to see you also lean on them for cybersecurity. 71% of the SMBs are planning to invest more in cybersecurity over the next 12 months. We're actually in the middle of this year's survey, and it's probably going to go up year over year, which is probably a good thing for the amount of cybersecurity dollars that weren't being spent previously. 45% of the SMBs report cybersecurity to be the top priority in their organization. And that's in Australia. So think about that. 45% consider cybersecurity the number one priority, and 80% say it's a top 5. And lastly, but of course not leastly, 75% of the SMBs worry that they will fall victim to an attack in the next 6 months. Now, a large portion of you said you've already been hit, or someone that was hit in the last 12 months. It's still on your mind, right? It's still going to happen. And yet in the marketplace, and it's especially true in Australia. Actually, Australia has the largest number of unfilled cybersecurity positions in any of the major markets around the world. But it's creating this problem where you can't just go out and randomly, talk to any IT person and they can solve for IT solutions. So the intent of the Security Collective really has been to team up and help solve for that unemployment gap that exists in your marketplace and in others. But by them working together, they can actually provide scale and resources at a level that most service providers will never be able to attain. So we start looking at this in a conversation perspective. Typically in non-COVID times when I'm traveling, and I'm looking forward to traveling again here shortly, we hear a lot of the same things from these businesses. First off, quite often we hear that businesses are too small, right? That is, hackers don't care about their data. And for some of you, you're probably shaking your head saying, yeah, we're not worried about that. And yet 45% of all cyber attacks, are happening to small businesses. And actually take it back, it's 64%. Sorry, I get my numbers mixed up. 64% of all attacks are happening to small businesses. And it's not because the hackers actually don't think you care about your data. It's that they know that they can cause you harm and pain and suffering if you can't access your data. Many business owners feel that they've already got enough tools in place. And you've got antivirus and managed firewalls and backups. And a few years ago, those were fine. But you start thinking about what percentage of your current workforce is no longer working from an office or is traveling and working remote. And they're no longer behind that firewall. So you need to rethink where your risk is and how it's going to actually impact them. I talked about that hackers don't care about your data. What we've found is that business owners feel that way, but hackers don't actually care about your data as much as they care about denying your access to the data. See, if you can't get access to your files and your systems, can you actually run your business? I'm guessing the answer there collectively is no, you no longer can actually do that. And of course, if I can click, there we go. You're probably wondering if your current service provider actually delivers on cybersecurity. Now, if one of the partners on the call today, are your service provider, you should be asking them, look, what's included and what's not, to really make sure that you understand, who's involved and what coverages you have and where your risk is. A lot of these conversations really boil down to what we call very simple risk conversations, to really just understand, where is your risk? Because if you know what that is, it's easier for you to go forward. Now, when we start looking at the marketplace in general, we see a lot of scary stats. I'm going to show you a few scary ones, but not because I'm going to make you uncomfortable in your chair or I'm trying to actually, make you very uncomfortable. It's just think about the cost of a typical cyber attack. See, a few years ago, a typical ransomware attack would cost us several $1,000s, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $10,000. And that's a lot of money, but it didn't put you out of business. And it certainly, you'd get by, you'd be okay. Business email compromise, the same thing. When it was somebody just trying to get you to go out and buy some Amazon Visa or Amazon gift cards, it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't fun, but you can suffer through that. But today we're seeing more and more cyber attacks are costing small businesses substantially more money. I'll show you some of the details behind that coming up next. So when we think about examples of large hacks, kind of, hey, this only happens to small companies. I'm going to rattle off some of the biggest retail and other firms around the world that have actually had cyber attacks. And let's talk about a few of these and see if you guys know any of these. So the first one, top left, I'll cover is a company called Target. They're a large retail chain. I think they're primarily North America, but they might very well be in Australia as well. What was fascinating about them is that when they were compromised, the original breach didn't actually happen to Target. It actually happened to their HVAC vendor. Their heating and air conditioning vendor was compromised. And I'll kind of give you the simple version of it. On the network, the intruders, the threat actors, as we call them, found a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet said, hey, here's all the Target stores, and here's the addresses, and here's the wireless username and password, so that the HVAC technicians could log in remotely and or with their iPads and fix and change the temperature controls in the different stores. Well, when the hackers got in, they actually realized that not only did they not have access. I mean, they had access to the air conditioning units, but they also had full access to payroll information, to credit card transactions, to inventory systems. And they were able to work their way around into what was ultimately the first major retail chain credit card attack. And a lot of us who used to shop at Target stopped for quite a while, which is what happens. Another one, Equifax. A lot of us probably deal with Equifax from a credit reporting agency or other services. And what was fascinating about their attack was, and it's kind of hard to believe, but they actually knew about it, about the vulnerability, because the attackers had come in several months prior to when they actually broke in and stole all the data. And it just so happened that an Equifax technician happened to see them and kicked them out. But the reason they knew about it is because there was a patch for their Unix servers that needed to be installed. But they couldn't install that patch until their software was updated to align and support that new patch. By installing that patch, it actually disabled their ability to deliver credit reports, and that would impact their ability to drive revenue. So they made a conscious decision to, keep a lookout on the attackers. Well, it didn't work so well, because when they broke in, they ended up acquiring, hundreds of millions of credit reports and credit information for people from around the world. The last one I want to cover is Marriott. Marriott to me is a fascinating story for a bunch of reasons. Most of us heard back in, it was actually summer of 2018 when that hit the press, and it impacted users all around the world. And I stay in Marriott, so I travel quite a bit, so I was impacted. But what was really interesting is when I started doing the research and due diligence into the entire attack, because these things in hindsight are always 20/20 vision. We can see better after what actually occurred. What we found out is that the original compromise was of the Starwood guest database. The original compromise happened in 2014. Now, I don't know about you, but I never heard about anything in 2014. And that's because they didn't know. Now, in 2016, Starwood sold to Marriott. Actually, Marriott bought Starwood and paid, I think it was $13 billion to acquire their business and their hotels. And oh, by the way, they also acquired the compromised database. Well, it was 2018 when Marriott actually saw the intruders coming back in and trying to re-access that database to get updated information. Now, 2014 original breach, 2016 they bought Starwood, 2018 Marriott paid out hundreds of millions of dollars to replace passports that were impacted from the actual breach. So these things happen to large companies, but in some cases they could have been fixed. And so if you're on the call today and you're a solicitor, an attorney, an accountant, and you deal with mergers and acquisitions, one of the things you should do, and the reason I talked to you about Marriott is because you should talk to your technology partner and have them do a security audit of the company you're about to acquire or your client is about to acquire to make sure that you're not, endorsing the acquisition of a previous breach. That's not good look for anybody, and most of us couldn't handle that. Now, when we start thinking about this from the smaller businesses perspective, you're probably wondering, why don't we hear about this more often? Well, the reality is, it's not typically newsworthy when it's not hundreds of millions of records being compromised anymore. If your local medical practice gets compromised and loses 13,000 records, it's not a good day, but it's no longer newsworthy. And maybe in the local market they care about it, but they're not talking about it. Obviously, it's embarrassing, to admit you've been hacked. All of you were willing to fess up and own up to it, but that's not normal. When we're in person, right, quite often, how many times do your friends call you and say, hey, we got hit by a ransomware attack today? It just doesn't happen. So you've got to keep in mind that it's embarrassing. And of course, nobody wants the horrible, PR associated with it. They don't want people talking about them in the press. That's not good. And, in Australia, you've got the notifiable data breach reporting requirements. Right? The legal ramifications, the fines, the lawsuits, do have an impact on businesses, and you have to be aware of what that means. And better you figure it out now before you've been compromised than after the fact when it's too late and your hair's on fire and you're trying to figure out exactly what it is you're going to do. So just kind of keep those things in mind. We want you to be proactive and think through your risk, as part of the overall approach to solving these issues. And so Adam and Steve, I think we've got our next poll.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, we're going to get Steve to launch that. Just while Steve's doing that, it'll pop up in the screen. Just a reminder that they are anonymous. Do you have a current cybersecurity insurance policy? Not part of most general business policies. We hear a lot of times, yes, we've got a policy, but cybersecurity insurance is a particular field, and one I'm sure Adam Hines would be very interested in these results. So 63% of the voting is in. Thank you for participation. Still coming as we speak.
And while you guys are doing that, don't forget that if you've got questions, if you put them into the Q&A icon down on the bottom of Zoom, the team will answer them, or will save them for me to talk about in our breakout afterwards.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. There has been a couple of questions come in. So hopefully the team are acknowledging those, and we'll get to those in the Q&A section. So there you go. Pretty interesting. 47% saying dedicated cybersecurity insurance policy. Interesting. One of the things the Security Collective hears about quite regularly, Jay, is, do I really need it? And, we'll cover that off today. And the other thing I hear pretty regularly is that we don't need the services of any externals because we have an insurance policy. And one of the things that we sort of say fairly regularly is have a look at the requirements, have a look at the detail of those insurance policies. I'm sure Adam will touch on this with Dudley a little bit later, but just because you have one doesn't mean part of that is doing the very basics, training your users, etc. And I'm sure we'll cover that off today. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay. So we kind of pick up from here. Let's start talking about some of the most common attacks that we're seeing out in the marketplace. Oops, go back. I went clicked a little fast for me, sorry. So business email compromise. I mentioned before that, early on, business email compromise was somebody pretending to be, the owner of a company, the managing director, financial director, or what have you, sending out an email, even though it wasn't from that person, saying, hey, I'm on holiday today. I'll be back on Monday, and I want to roll out a new employee perk program. Would you mind going out and getting, $10, $100 Visa gift cards? Scratch off the codes and send me the codes so I can go ahead and put them into the program we're announcing on Monday. And the unaware employee doesn't know any better and goes out and says, yeah, I'll do that for you. Of course I will. And does that, not realizing that there was some deception at play, right? It really wasn't the business owner who was sending that email. It was, somebody else was faking their account, and the employee didn't pick up on it. Now, that was great when that's all it was. I mean, it was still a bad day, but it wasn't the end of the world. But when we start seeing attacks, that actually go much deeper and causing more harm. Let's see if I can get to that next screen.
If you can't, Joe, I can do that for you. Have you lost control?
Yeah, I'm still on the business email compromise. There we go. So from a financial harm perspective, the end of last year, last accounting year, the Australian Cybersecurity Center talked about business email compromises. There were 4,200 of them reported in Australia, representing $142 million in losses. That's about $35,000 per attack. Now, I don't know about most of you, but $35,000 is enough to get my attention. And it probably is you. And in most cases, the scenario here is the attacker actually gains access to a real email account. Okay, they on the dark web, they acquire some credentials, and then they send real emails from a real user's account saying, hey, we had an issue with our accounting system, so we've changed banks. Would your accounts payable person please update to our new banking information? And then 2 months later, that supplier calls you and says, hey, we haven't been paid. And your response is, of course we've paid. We paid this day and this day. We always pay on time. How dare you? Until you realize that somewhere in there, somebody was compromised and that change was made without knowing what was, and actually paying attention to what was actually going on. So it's much harder to tell that that's actually happening. And so not only do you need cybersecurity controls for those, but you also need financial controls, right? You don't make those kinds of changes now without, multiple verifications to make sure that it's done properly. So when we start looking at this from the next perspective, then the other area where we see an awful lot of pain and suffering are actually ransomware attacks. And a ransomware attack, if you don't know what that is, a ransomware attack is when the attacker puts some software on a machine and it encrypts all the files, makes them unreadable. Now, quite often, most of us use encryption today to help protect files, right? But we have the key. When a threat actor launches a ransomware attack, they hold the key and they won't give it to you until you pay them for the ransom. Now, ransomware attacks just a few years ago, again, a couple $1,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. It wasn't, again, enough to cause a lot of harm to a business. It was more of an annoyance. But at the end of last year, we saw the average ransomware payment jump to over $178,000. And that's just the cost of paying the ransom. That does not include recovery time, legal fees, compliance issues, bad PR, breach notification. All those things, extend that conversation in a way that's meaningful and harmful to most small businesses. Now, some of you may say, Jay, 178,000, no problem. But most of you are thinking, yeah, that would be enough harm to really mess up our month. So just be aware that it's not just the fact that you're down potentially for days or even weeks, but it's also the actual cost just to get your files back, and then the appropriate time to actually recover those files. And I'll cover that a little bit more here in just a moment. I think now we're up for our next poll.
Thanks, Jay. We're going to get Steve to launch that, and really appreciate your participation. It gives us a feel for why you've joined today. People are starting to complete this. Have you clearly identified the top 2 to 3 cyber risks to your business? I find this a very interesting question regularly. Jay will talk more a little later about, everyone has a different set of risks. There's a, believe it or not, there is a methodology of how to protect your business. But that always starts with understanding what you need to protect first, where are the gaps? And I'm sure most businesses in our experience have gaps. So we'll just getting to a very good completion rate here. We might give that another 10 seconds, Steve, and close that one off.
It's fascinating. I almost would love, I don't have time for it, but if you guys want to drop in the Q&A, if you've identified the top 2 or 3 risks to your business, I'd love if you could share those. It might be a great conversation. I'm not saying that I want you to give your employee information out there, but if you can just cover high level views of what they are in the Q&A, that would be great.
Interestingly, they're 52, only 52% of, we had, again, 122 registrations today, and only 52% of which have actually identified the risk to their business. Is that typical, Jay? Sort of numbers?
Probably a little bit above average. I think that you probably got some of your own clients on here that you've already had these tough conversations with. So if that's the case, that's great. If that's not, let's make sure that those really are the right 3. Obviously I called out, business email compromise and ransomware, which a bunch of people have probably said, yeah, those are the 2 that I'm worried about also. But there's probably so much more, especially as we start to move data to the cloud, as we've got remote workforces, we've got international workforces, all of these potentially introduce risk. And I think there's the one that's my, I hate to call it my go-to or my favorite, because I don't have a favorite. I don't wish harm on anybody, but third-party risk. I've seen so many times where an accounting system vendor, their user account that logs into your network was compromised. And that creates, harm and challenges for you. So, being aware of third-party risk in this conversation is certainly important as well. All right, so let's kind of run through the very simple question. When a cyber attack occurs, who's responsible? Now, I know that we all want to do this and all point fingers in different directions, right? It's easier that way, but it always starts in my mind with what we call the data owner. And the data owner, in the scheme of things, we talk about data responsibility. The data owner themselves are typically the financial director, the managing director, the CEO, the president, that owns that ultimate liability because it's their data. So they're charged with actually protecting it. We typically can identify who they are in a business because they usually have the liability and they establish the budget for protecting data. Now, next is your information technology team. This is the team that takes what's been approved and budgeted for and then goes and implements and maintains those systems. But if you haven't implemented or budgeted for all the controls you need today to protect your business, then you've got to certainly look at that. And that's really where risk management comes in. And we call that the information security team, but they're going to come in, they're going to assess with you, right, with the data owner, where is the most important data? Where does it lie? How important is it to you? How much time, are you willing to wait for the data to be restored, recovery time effort and recovery point objective? How old is the data? And then look for ways to actually mitigate risk. The interesting part about mitigating risk is that when it comes to cybersecurity, a lot of the things that we could do don't cost a lot of money, but they might require you as a business owner or data owner to sacrifice a little bit of convenience. Longer passwords, multi-factor authentication, and a few others, are ones that come to mind that don't have a major cost, but do provide a major value to your business. So you want to make sure you're thinking through that and having that conversation with your service provider to really understand your risk and what your options are to help mitigate, the impact from them. Now, an example of ones that we've seen in the past. I hate to talk about this one. We've changed the names here to protect the innocent. But an example that we see quite often where I find and identify risk, there's two major, there's lots of departments, but human resources and accounting and sales are like the 3 weak points in most businesses. And so we've seen this on a regular basis, probably every month or more, where the human resource person, puts out a job posting out on social media, like on LinkedIn. And what we've found, which was really fascinating, because we talked about your business being behind the firewall, but in this case, you're putting out the job posting on LinkedIn, and then on LinkedIn, which is not even behind your firewall, there's communications going on. In this case, we see an example where I'm going to call the threat actor Yuri. Yuri reaches out to the HR manager, says, "Hey, I heard that you've got an opening for this tier 3 technical support. I believe I have the skills, but before I submit the request, would you mind taking a quick look at my resume and make sure it aligns correctly? Look at my LinkedIn profile." And what will happen is we'll see some examples where they build a relationship with the human resources person, the person in charge of hiring. And next thing you know, as IT people, we've been telling our colleagues, hey, don't click on anything you weren't expecting. In this example here, Marnie was expecting an email from Yuri with the resume. And of course, she clicks on it. That's her job is to find resources, find employees. Now, what's funny is in real life stories, when this happens, they'll click on it and it won't open. The Word document or the attachment won't open. Like we see this so many times, it's like it's a recurring theme. And the HR person is like, that's kind of weird. A tech person that can't send me a good Word document that I can actually read. So in this case, I'm going to give you a real life example where this person was actually going out and looking at their pictures, right? And they were getting ready to take their logo and upload the new logo that they just had created onto their checks. So when they wrote company checks, they had the new payroll. And all of a sudden, what actually happened was this person saw the pop-up. It says, hey, your files have all been encrypted. And if you've ever been through a ransomware attack, these things move so fast and they cause so much harm, especially for unsuspecting employees. And in this case, the IT team would never even have much of a chance to even defend against this because the communication started on LinkedIn. Now, sure, they might be able to protect their email, and hopefully you've got, Office 365 or email protection in place. Hopefully you've got ransomware protection in place where you can point and click and actually solve this. But for so many businesses, they had not thought about those types of attacks and how they work their way in using social aptitude, as a way to actually gain access into the business. Another one that happened, a law firm, and we actually got called in to help with the incident after it happened. So we weren't protecting this business. It was a 140 user law firm or solicitor firm, hit by a ransomware attack just before Christmas. It was actually Friday night before Christmas. And that year was 2016. Christmas was on a Sunday. And it was fascinating how this happened, because when they hit by the attack, literally 5 million files were encrypted. And the attackers like to use holidays, right? Because they know they have like holiday weekends where you've got a bank holiday or others. They've got more time to cause damage and really lock down the encryption. In this case, they had all weekend for it to happen. This law firm back at the time paid the $25,000 ransom. That's back when Bitcoin was like at $1,000. So today, where Bitcoin is somewhere in the $50,000 or $60,000, even if they would charge one Bitcoin, or they would have charged probably 10 or 12, this law firm still would have paid that because they needed their files. Now you're probably saying, Jay, what about their backups, right? They had backups of those files. Well, their backups were corrupted. One of the things that we've learned in cybersecurity over the years, and we've tested this, the Ponemon Institute says that the average attacker or threat actor is in a business network 190 days before they've been identified. 190 days. In this case, in this law firm, the attacker had been in their network for over 300 days. So think about the amount of harm that they could cause to your business in that period of time. In this case, and if you're technical, you will not like this, but this is what really happened. The attackers had the credentials to the network. They had the usernames and passwords, including administrator level. So they logged into the backup server and they unticked all the boxes for the data files that were being backed up. And they were only backing up at that point the routine Windows files, the ones you get on a CD when you buy a computer. And because of that, they had no way to actually restore from backups. Now, that wasn't the worst part. The worst part is that even after they paid the ransom and they got back the decryption key, they were still down for 2 weeks because it took 39 hours per terabyte to decrypt the data. Now, I'm not going to tell you it's always 39 hours to decrypt the data, but if I'm half wrong, it takes 20 hours, right? The amount of time that's necessary to recover larger businesses is more than most of us have actually ever expected. So I would kind of share this so that you really have an understanding of what the impact, of that cyber attack could actually look like. I think we're up for our next poll.
Yes, just while Steve's launching that, I'm just conscious of time. Jay's doing a great job in getting through this. We are earmarked to complete Jay's component of this presentation about 12:35, but we will go past that. Hopefully those people that can stick around with us, there's generally some of the best parts or the most enjoyed parts or most relevant parts to these sessions from past sessions are that Q&A session. So if you can stick around, that would be fantastic. The question is, when was the last time you reviewed and practiced your cyber security incident response plan? Within 6 months, 12 months? I don't have one, or I'm not sure. Great responses again, really getting well over 80% of people that are on this call voting, which is great. I think we might close that off there. People are still trickling in there, Steve. So 34% within the last 6 months. But I guess the vast majority, a solid 50%, don't have one or aren't aware of what it is, Jay. Fairly common for what we see.
Yeah, and now that we've asked the question, if you're on here and you're one of those, 42% that don't have one, or you're not sure, make sure you reach out to the Security Collective and have them kind of walk through it with you. They can help you build one. It doesn't take a lot of effort, but it does require a little bit of time and commitment on your part to really make sure that they're solving for the right issues.
Jay, if I may, one of the biggest things that we hear very commonly is that, I'll engage my IT department. Incident response plans are not an IT issue. Would Would you agree? It's really a business related issue. It's not an IT initiative.
Yeah, it's actually a risk management initiative. So, IT can be part of the conversation, and they should be, but it's not really all on them. It's really on executive leadership to really dial that in, because it's part of company policy. Same as you have acceptable use policy and holiday policies and other ones. It's on you to actually make sure you've got an incident response policy and plan put in place. So to kind of think about all the things we've already talked about, one of the things I want to kind of point you to and what you should do next is to really start thinking about how to identify what's important and what's worth protecting in our business. And on these slides, and you guys will get a copy of the slides, we've got a few things that we see most small businesses put in place from a technology perspective. And the concept here is to go through and check off the things that you have and understand what you don't, so that you can determine what your next step should look like. And I'm not saying that every single company needs to have every single box checked, but if you understand what those technologies are and where they fit in place, it makes it easier for you to really have that intelligent conversation. Because look, every one of these boxes could come with a variety of different products, right? So you want to make sure that you kind of align those to your team and make sure that the team you're working with at the Security Collective can actually help solve those for you. When I'm thinking about, a go forward strategy for you, when talking about managing risk, I actually think about this, from your house, right? Take your business aside for a moment. Think about where you live and what's in your home that's worth protecting to you. You've got to focus your time and energy on what's most important. Most of you are going to tell me, if we were in person, your family, your pets, your family collectibles, your jewelry, some cash, important documents and electronics. And those are all the most common things that we actually hear that you probably want to protect. Now, my example of electronics, it makes this really easy conversation. So for all of you, and you guys can answer in the Q&A panel if you want, or wherever you want to actually answer this, what's more important to you, your TV or your laptop? You don't even need to answer, because you all just said laptop. I heard you all the way across the pond. The reality is that that's where your most important critical data is, right? And so when we go through and think about that for your business, they're going to analyze what's most important and then really define what's most important, like what you have to have. At the end of the day, you then got to figure out, what do you have in place to protect it? So if I'm thinking about your house, right? Some things you guys do to protect your house. You've got doors, windows, locks, alarm systems, dogs, police, maybe a cricket bat, doorbell camera, insurance, yard signs, motion sensors, neighborhood watch, or what I like to call the nosy neighbor that emails out every time they see somebody driving down the street that shouldn't be there. But these are all the things that you most commonly put in place to protect your house, right? Well, when we look at this from a cybersecurity perspective, the left-hand column are things that we do to actively protect, right? Try to keep the common criminal out of our home. But most of us then actually expand and we go to detection. Remember earlier when I mentioned that the average intruder is in a network about 190 days? The sooner we can detect an intruder, the faster that we can actually take action and ultimately respond. So when you think of it from that perspective, we're actually going to look at this from a NIST perspective, because this happens to align to NIST. And so we're going to identify what's important in your business. We're going to look at how you protect, detect, and respond to it, and ultimately what your recovery capabilities are afterwards. And that aligns to NIST. It also aligns to ISO, aligns to most cybersecurity frameworks. You're really focused on helping you figure out what good looks like. So if I'm going to spend any time with you guys at all thinking about what to do, I'm going to have you talk to your teams, understand what's included, what's not included, and then understand the impact and what those specific types of technologies are designed to protect against. And ultimately, once you know what those are, it's easy for you to actually move forward and actually help solve these issues. So looking at it from a different perspective, a little bit more detailed, what do you want to protect? What are the threats that could impact data to your business? And ultimately, what's your ability to respond and to detect from those threats? The faster you can get through that process, the easier it is to then go back and measure what your protection, detection, and response mechanisms are actually going to look like. And ultimately, that's what tells you what boxes you can check and where your security gaps might actually be, and figure out what's most important. And like some of you are going to say, hey guys, that's too much. We're not prepared for that. At least now you know, so you can start building a plan of action and to build solutions over time to help protect your business, because it's not a destination. Security truly is a journey. And lastly, please do not forget to spend time testing your ability to recover. So your incident response plan, and then actually working through the recover stages to see if you have a plan B, like offline backups, ones that can't be encrypted because they aren't plugged into your network. If they exist, it's a great way to really help you solve these issues. And we've heard so many businesses that didn't have those in place, that they had that right, everything else going on in their space would have been much easier for them to actually solve for. So I think we're up to our last poll.
I think so, Jay. Thank you. We'll get Steve to launch that. Do you have a current business continuity DR plan? Ensures the resilience. And yes, no, I'm not sure. I think most organizations feel they do, and we do a lot of these security assessments. Everyone on this panel today is involved in that space. And we hear a lot from business owners, and that ultimately that I've got backup. Backup is not business continuity. I think great responses there again. Steve's just launching those now. Thank you, Steve. It's only 56% are comfortable that they've got the business resilience that they need to keep operating under any circumstances.
Yeah, it's something we all have to look at and we all have to consider. So it's an important part of that conversation, trying to move forward with cybersecurity. So, one of the reasons that I told you that I thought that it was fascinating that we had this collective. It's a bunch of service providers from around the country that are really focused on doing the right thing for all of their customers. And I think at the end of the day, these next steps make the most sense for business owners. But Adam, why don't you talk about these?
Yeah, look, firstly, I want to say, thank you so much, Jay. You're, the way of presenting really, in my experience, everyone that's on the calls probably realizes that Jay presents in a way that really makes sense, right? A lot of what we do in this space is common sense. It starts with common sense. It starts with education. It starts with, firstly understanding where the gaps are. So very much appreciate that, Jay. It was a great presentation. I'm sure everyone has enjoyed that. I think, Jay's asking here, and I'll just ask my fellow panelists and attendees to start putting their cameras on as we move through the next Q&A section. I'll do some introductions in a moment. But I think, one thing that we want to be clear on is that, we start with education, and part of that is no one could help any organization until we understand where those gaps are. And as a result, each of the people that you've registered through today, whether it's Subnet or Kaine Mathrick Tech or Core Tech or OPC, et cetera, have the ability to conduct and present a cybersecurity risk assessment. And, typically most of the tools that we all use aren't intrusive. They won't go into your network. So we'd be thrilled to do that for you, to help everyone on this call to understand where the gaps are. Everyone will get a copy of this recording as well. And there's some fantastic special offers from Datto, one of our key partners, that can help you build that business resilience as required. But on that note, look, again, I wanted to thank Jay once again and start to introduce the panelists that we've assembled for you today. Now, I'm very conscious of time. As I said, this was meant to conclude today, and we'll do our best to get that done at 1:15. So we're going to move into the Q&A section now of this presentation. And on that note, I might do some quick introductions that we missed previously. I'm going to take over here, Jay, if I can get control. So. Firstly, I think I'd like to introduce Adam Hines. He's the director at Aether Insurance. If you'd like to say hello, and thanks for your attendance, Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. And also thank you to the Security Collective for the invitation to speak. I'm the owner and director of Aether Insurance and Risk. We're based in North Sydney and also Newcastle, and generally provide general insurance needs to a number of clients and industries across various sectors, of which cybersecurity obviously is one of those. So thank you.
Fantastic. Appreciate that. The second person is Dudley Knelle. He's one of the partners at Gadens Lawyers. If you'd like to say hello.
Sorry to jump across you, Adam. Thanks for the intro, and Jay, thanks for your presentation. I'll keep it short and sweet so we've got some time to talk to some of the questions today. I'm a cybersecurity partner and technology partner at Gadens, and we're across Australia nationally, Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, Brisbane, and I think Adelaide as well. So I look forward to some good questions this morning.
Appreciate it. And last but not least, Scott Mathrick, Technical Director at Kaine Mathrick Tech, has a huge amount of experience post-breach and has a lot of value to add to the panel today. Say hello, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Adam, and thanks, Jay. Again, great presentation and looking forward to the questions that are about to come.
Now, Steve, I might ask for your assistance here, given that I've got control. If you've got access to that Q&A section, I think there was a whole bunch of questions that came in. If you're there, Steve, I might get you to help me through. Is there any unanswered questions or?
There was just one question which Brett's answered, but I think it'd be worthwhile talking about. So this is from Adrian. How do you become aware that you have a potential cyber hacker in your IT environment prior to the cyber hacker reaching out for a ransom payment?
So if you could just repeat that for me, Steve, for the panelists.
So how do you become aware that you have a potential cyber hacker in your IT environment prior to them reaching out for a ransom payment?
So what a great question, something that we hear very often. And before I throw over to, I might throw this one over to you, Scott, given that sort of post-breach with your OK. But one of the things that you've heard from Jay is that, on average, 6 months is how long these hackers are spending within the environment. That's not what we saw typically a few years ago. But what are some of the methodologies for early detection, Scott?
Yeah, look, you're right, Adam. I think Jay hit it on the head as well. It's about 190 days before we actually know that someone is in our environment. So there are special products out there that actually do that. And the main one is what's called a SIEM solution. So what that is, it's a platform, it's a SaaS platform that we typically put in place, and that monitors all the traffic that's coming inside and outside of that network. And it's very important that when you have a product like this in place, that you've got a SOC or eyes and ears on it all the time. So as an example, if there was a ransomware attack that happened on 10 p.m. on a Friday night and all the staff have gone home, we need to be actually logging in there and making sure that we've got people in there to actually review what's happening, so that when everyone comes in on the Monday morning, all our files aren't encrypted and we can actually work as a business. So SIEM, again, it's not a prevention platform. It's more of a notification platform, but it's very important because it actually logs all the information that's going on. So as an example of that, we performed an audit and assessment for a customer about a month ago. And in one day, they had 26,000 failed login attempts. Now, they didn't have a SIEM solution in place. So as we were on site, there was an attacker who was actually trying to get in. So if we had a SIEM solution in place, that would have been flagged with a help desk. And then we would have found out straight away that there was something going on and then got in there to try and resolve the issue.
And Scott, just an extension of that question, I think, a SIEM service is typically, in years gone by, it could be seen as very expensive, could be seen as, mainly enterprise businesses are utilizing a SIEM service, right? Why have things changed? Why is it attainable by SMBs in this country these days?
Yeah, look, I think our, as businesses now, and you would have seen through the presentation as well, it's not enterprise businesses that are getting targeted anymore. It's many small businesses, and we see it here now all the time. So I think we're now more in tune of what's going on, and the pricing has come down for a lot of these products as well. And especially now that we understand that we're responsible for our own data and that we have to protect it. And also governance comes with that as well. So especially when we're going for a cyber claim, we need to actually demonstrate that we've put in the best framework that we could to actually recognise if an attack was happening. And having a SIEM solution does that for us.
Look, that's fantastic. I think I'd like to, another question that came in, I might throw this one over to you, Dudley. Most of the people that have attended today, because it was a non-technical presentation, are business owners or board members. And what can they do with your experience? What can they do to educate themselves, given cybersecurity is a very specialised field? And sometimes their IT professionals that they're working with are just not equipped to advise them.
Oh, look, sorry, Adam, I've cut across you again for the second time. Look, it's a really good question, and I guess a tick in the box for coming to these sorts of sessions and coming along to this sort of session today is a very good place to start. If business owners and directors are a bit more interested, the Australian Institute of Company Directors puts out a lot of good information and also runs courses to skill up directors on their duties around cybersecurity. And I said to someone yesterday that you can go along to all the courses that you want, but surrounding yourself with people in your business and the business partners that you're working with who actually have a skill set to reduce the risk for you in the area is critical. So if that means hiring people that know what they're about from a technical perspective, but working with partners, whether they're MSPs providing managed services or also with that security overlay, that's critical. So working with people that are smarter than yourself will help reduce that risk for you, but it also build your own skill set from a director's perspective, because as we know, cybersecurity is not just an IT issue, it's a whole of business issue.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And hopefully, thank you for that question. That's really good advice. A question's come in for Adam Hines. Is your cyber hacking insurance coverage policy subject to where your data is backed up to? Is your insurance policy subject to where your data is being backed up to in your experience?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Look, I think in the answer to that question, you've got to bear in mind there obviously are a number of different insurers out there who have different offerings and different policy wordings and exclusions. So first and foremost, before you give any advice on that, is to check on with your broker and what policy you do have. From my understanding, the answer to that question is no. However, insurers now are asking more pointed questions as to where your data is being held. And the security measures you have around that. So you'll find a lot of insurers in the current market will have a bit of a checklist or a blacklist from their end, whereby if your data's held there, they may not even take you on as an insurable risk. So yeah, just one thing to, I guess, check your policy wording or ask your advisor to give you advice on that piece.
Fantastic. And I think it is an extension to that question for either yourself or Dudley. What are some of the type of insurances that you may or may not have seen that have been denied? What are the fundamentals that the insurance policy are asking businesses to do to ensure they have that level of protection to make sure that they're following to get paid if the worst happens? Yeah. What are some of the fundamentals they're asking businesses to do to ensure that they're protecting themselves in a very basic way?
Yeah, I'll jump into that one, Dudley, first, if that's okay.
Sure.
I think the insurers now are putting more of a focus on policies and procedures. And I think when you read back or listen to what Jay had to say before, it very much is a risk management point of view. It's no point just going out and taking an insurance policy, and the insurers are looking at that very closely. One, what your claims history are, what your education piece around insurers, and obviously what procedures you have in place. So as much as it is, yes, an insurance policy, that should be part of a greater risk management plan which you have as a client or a business.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And the adage, the big print giveth and the small print taketh away, is so true for cyber insurance policies. So I think, as Jay pointed out in his presentation, having incident response plans in place that that you've tried and tested, filling out those questionnaires, and again, working pretty closely with your MSP provider to help work through those technical requirements that insurers are putting forward to their customers before they sign them up as customers is really important. The other thing is understanding not just what's in your policy and what's covered, what risks you're covering, but what's not. So working with a broker like Adam who can speak to the genuine risks that are going to be impacting your business, but also asking Adam to say, well, what am I not covered for? What's not in here that may happen to me or may occur as a risk, which I really want to have cover for. And I think, as Adam pointed out too, having cyber insurance in place is just part of the story. It goes hand in hand with having effective managed services with a security overlay, also having built out your organisation to raise awareness and to have training in place for your staff, because your staff are your biggest asset, but they're also your biggest liability when it comes to things like business email compromise and ransomware attacks.
Yeah, look, it's a very good question. I think there's a lot of questions still coming in, but one that came in for earlier, maybe this is Jay. Jay, business email compromise is not going anywhere fast. It's actually on the rise. It's devastating, right? And it's one of the most popular crimes these days. Why has it become so prevalent, business email compromise, and why is it one of the biggest growth areas for hackers?
Well, it's the easiest to execute. It doesn't require any high-end technology or coding skills. I mean, if I can gain access, I go out to the dark web and buy some credentials, and some of them work, or I can log into your Office 365 account and send emails as your staff. I mean, at that point, the sky's the limit. I can do all kinds of creative things with it to generate cash, back for me and from my hacking organization or me personally. And of course, you're paying me in Bitcoins in most cases when it's all said and done. So either you wired me money willingly, and I can just move it into cryptocurrency quickly, or you're going to pay me if it's a ransomware attack in cryptocurrency. And that's going to make it very difficult for the authorities to be able to track down where the money went and who it went to.
Yeah, it's a great point. I'm going to ask Brett Lodge, who, to put him on the spot, this is unplanned. From your perspective, what are some of the fundamental ways that businesses can help to protect or to get an early warning detection on business email compromise?
Look, I think, as always with this type of stuff, it's really using the tools and technologies that we can put in place to, I guess, detect a lot of that very early. Having with the email compromise, obviously there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done around making sure you've at least got the backups of the system. So if they are compromised, you can do a recovery. And I think, as Scott mentioned before, using a lot of tools like the theme-based tools and the technology tools like EDR to, I guess, try and detect that as early as possible and obviously prevent as much as possible is probably the best control method there.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point that you make, Brett. I think, the panelists are representative of, the market shifting away from is it going to happen to, when it's going to happen, so we've got some insurance guys, we've got some lawyers on the phone, we've got, people versed in working with organizations, unfortunately, after the breach, because it's just becoming so common. I think one of the stats that Jay showed on his screen is 64% of the business in this country have suffered some type of breach, and that is only getting worse because it's a $7 trillion industry and growing. It's huge. There are a lot of more. Scott, anything you would add to that in terms of some of those fundamental tools that businesses could look at to give them that early warning detection?
Yeah, look, I think Brett sort of mentioned what needs to happen. We have to have all our EDR policies in place. There's so many other things we can do in terms of encryption, in terms of MFA, in terms of the real basic stuff, which the MSP should be doing anyway, as such backups. But one of the biggest things, I think, is probably user training. That's sort of low-hanging fruit for us, where we can get the buy-in from the top down and really sort of promote that culture within our business, where we're educating our users, and not just once off either, but like every month, to make sure that we've always got that going through, especially now because we're all working from home, or a lot of us still are. So we need to make sure that we've got that education front of mind, because at the end of the day, someone can always click on something, and it doesn't matter what product sets we have in there. If someone does click on that dangerous email, or like Jay had with the LinkedIn and that resume, there's still things that we still can't protect from. So we just need to have that education, I think.
Look, that's fantastic. And we see a very similar thing. And I'm sure, Brett Norton, your client base, who you do a lot of work in the government space out of Canberra. Anything you would add to that about how, businesses, because most of the businesses that Security Collective work with have either internal IT departments or MSPs, yet they're still, unfortunately getting breached. Anything you would add to that early detection process?
Only that education, I think, is fundamental to protecting your business. And this doesn't need to be onerous either. We can deliver these training. We all use similar tool sets to deliver this training. Can be done online. They're typically 5-minute, 10-minute type training sessions, which we deliver out to clients on a fortnightly or monthly basis. And the benefit of this is that it keeps it top of mind for everybody. So, they start to become aware that these are, when you see a scam email, they will know what they'll be able to detect it. And we do know that 80% of these breaches do come via email. So training fundamental to your organisation, and everybody should have it. It's just should be mandatory.
It's interesting, isn't it? I saw a stat the other day. One of the tools that we have access to and use is called ID Agent. It's about phishing simulation attacks, and there was a great study done over the last 12 months, I think, deployed to well over 1 million users globally. And the stats came in that 30% of your staff, of the people on this call, will fail consistently. 30% initially will fail clicking on an email that could allow them access to your network. And over a period of 12 months, if you're doing regular phishing simulation attacks, that falls to, I think Steve might be able to help me with, I think it's less than 5%, 2% comes to mind. It's a pretty phenomenal stat. So, if you think about, that 15 ways document that Jay shared, security awareness training is just one of those ways. Multi-factor is another. It's such a combination of tools that are required to really give you that resilience. A question has come in back to Adam. Does having more cyber tools used reduce your insurance costs?
Yeah, look, I think, thanks, Adam. To bear in mind with that one, the insurance or the cyber insurance space is very much still a young product in the insurance market. So I think insurers are still realizing what a claim cost looks like and what the tail of those claims can be. I know Jay touched on it in his presentations with business interruption forms part of a greater loss, and you're seeing claims of a substantial amount. I think the risk management tools you have in place at the moment will help tick the box from getting insurance at the moment. I don't believe they're going to cheapen your premium, and that's just being, I guess, honest. The more favourable, I guess, procedures you have in place, better insurers will want to write your business. I think in the current insurance landscape, where it is a very hard and tough to place insurance market across all lines of insurance, the more, I guess, beneficial you look towards an insurer will definitely help with one, getting a policy, and help getting some reduction in an insurance cost.
Yeah, great answer. This has already been answered by Brett through a question coming in this QA, but what's the difference between NGAV or EDR and AV, antivirus? This comes up really regularly, and we're also mindful that a lot of people on this call are not technical and are owners. And look, I might throw this over to Scott. Again, the difference of traditional AV versus a really solid EDR solution. And for those that are on the call, EDR is endpoint detection and response solution, which is a replacement to that antivirus product being used traditionally. But anything you'd add to that, Scott? What is the difference?
Yeah, look, it is, Adam. So the main difference is, to have it in a real simple form, is with our basic antivirus software, we have a database which is up on the web somewhere, which all our virus vendors patch into. So as new viruses come out, there's an agent or the antivirus software that's installed on the device, and that goes up and it cross-checks against what's being put in that database. So they're basically what's called a virus definition or a signature. But when we go down the EDR route, we've actually got smarter software that can actually look at how you're using your machine and actually work out what the software is doing. So as an example, if a ransomware attack came through, the actual software doesn't know that that's a ransomware attack, but it's smart enough to know that all those files shouldn't be changing at the rate that they're changing. So what it would then do, it's smart enough to actually shut down that machine and take it off the network. So it gives you a much bigger level of protection than your antivirus software. And typically, your antivirus software won't stop ransomware.
Thank you so much. Now, guys, I'm just conscious that we've sort of reached about 1:10 now, which is where we had planned to finish this off. There's still a lot of questions coming in. We've still got well over 50 or 60 attendees, so we had some drop-offs, but still got well over 50 people still on the call. So I'm simply going to suggest to everyone that we're going to wrap this up in terms of the official wrap-up shortly. But the panelists, I'm sure, are happy to spend their time and continue to answer some questions for as long as required, given that we've still got such a solid 50 plus attendees on the line. But I think at this point, so I'll come back to some questions in a moment, but I really would like to once again thank Jay for his presentation today. It was very insightful, and hopefully it's given everyone that's joined this call a lot to think about. I want to thank Adam Hines from Aether Insurance. Again, very insightful. I want to thank Dudley from Gadens Lawyers again. Your participation is fantastic, and I think to everyone that attended is still on we're trying to present a bunch of people with credentials that, to educate you first, to provide real world experience of what's happening out there. Now, the Security Collective was brought together not so much to sell you a product, but really to provide that level of education that you need to make sure that your business is resilient in what is probably the biggest risk to all our businesses moving forward. I want to thank my official, my Security Collective peers. Again, it's been a great presentation. On that note, happy to continue to take these right through. As I said, we've still got well over 50 people on the call now. A little bit of housekeeping, as I said, you'll receive contact from whoever you registered through. They'll reach out. They'll make the recording available to you. They'll also ask you if you're interested to get the cybersecurity risk assessment done to give you some real insights into your own business. But thank you all on that basis. Again, given that we still have quite a solid base of people asking questions, one's come in from Derek and Les. How do we protect from staff plugging in a USB? This comes up very regularly. How do we protect from staff plugging a USB into, that potentially impacts the systems? Can software detect this? Any one of us could answer that. I think we might throw that one over to Scott.
Yeah, look, there's plenty of platforms that do it. So the cyber package we have is called SentinelOne. That does it, but there's plenty of them that actually do it. It's actually quite common now. We get asked a lot for it.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. There is, we do it through we also use SentinelOne and a bunch of other products. You can even do it through policies now, right? Through Microsoft policies, etc. And Brett, you might want to touch on that. But it is a very common one. It's certainly something that you can't. I saw part of the security assessment that we conduct for our clients is based on the NIST framework. And one of the questions asked is, do you allow USB devices to plug into the network? Now, in the day that we live in with these type of headsets, etc., it's a fairly ridiculous question in my mind. But it doesn't mean that you should allow full access, right? So USB is something that comes up regularly. Just having a look through some outstanding questions here. Make sure we're trying to cover off most of these. If any of my fellow panelists see one that I haven't covered, by all means call it out. Might throw one over to Jay, given that you haven't done enough talking today, Jay. We love hearing from you. It's all about the pandemic. How will the pandemic continue, and what has the pandemic and COVID contributed to cybersecurity? What does it mean for Australian businesses' security postures moving forward?
So there's some fascinating data coming out of the last 12 to 13, 14, 15 months. One of the things that we've known over the years is that business in general will typically adopt 1% of the new technology coming out year over year. That might be a staggering number. You might be thinking about, wait, what do you mean? Now, I'm not talking about Microsoft Office rolls out some new features and you start using those. I'm talking about new technology, expansion of technology. In 2020, the last 12 months now, we saw a 15% increase in the amount of adoption of new technology by business. Some of it's obvious. Tools like Zoom and Teams, we were using them a little bit, but now everybody uses it. We saw remote document management became a major capability so that employees could see those critical confidential documents without being in the office. We saw an increase of remote control tools, remote access tools, VPN connections. And so cybersecurity has kind of now got a really good foothold in most businesses, and they're aware of it. In a go forward strategy, that doesn't stop. Like now that we've got a taste of what using technology really can do for our businesses, the ability for us to be able to expand that, is tremendous. I mean, this event right here is a great example. I mean, we've pulled people in from, 2 continents and definitely, 4 major markets inside of Australia to be able to have the same conversation that a year ago, we would have held 4 separate meetings in person to deliver that. And so, I'd start thinking about what it means to have, potentially 42 or 43% of all workers, all data workers, as we call those, that sit behind a computer, can now work from anywhere in the world. So that changes your hiring and recruiting strategies. It changes your ability to pay people and recruit people of varying degrees and educations. It really just creates a whole new dynamic that would have taken us 15 years to get to, and we did it in a year. And so that's how I'd be thinking about this going forward.
Yeah, fantastic insights. I think, we talked a little bit about incident response plans, and I might throw this over to you, Dudley. What are they and how are they helpful in managing breach events?
Look, it's a good question, and it's been touched on a couple of times during today's session. So really, they're a playbook that organisations can refer to. They're really important policies to have in place because they list your internal contacts for when an incident hits, but more importantly, they list your external contact points. So when an incident does hit, you can refer to your incident response plan, making sure that you've got a paper copy, because there's awful stories of companies that have got themselves a brand spanking new incident policy and it sits on their network, but they don't actually have a paper copy. So when that network got locked, they can't actually access it. So in terms of other things that you would cover within that incident plan, it's really a playbook to manage an incident if it hits that organisation. Listen, external, internal contacts, walks you through particular scenarios in terms of managing that incident, helps you to preserve evidence in relation to information that you need to preserve. Also helps the organisation to not make mistakes. Often when an incident hits, many organisations run around like headless chooks and often do a lot of damage in that very short 24 to 48 hour period before they've really been able to engage successfully with their insurers or their forensics experts. It really helps people to know who to call first. So, having the bat phone to call your MSP or your security provider, and to let them know that that's occurred, to resist the temptation to engage directly with ransom, to threat actors who've perhaps sent you that ransomware note. So, look, if there's one thing that people if you take one thing away from this sessions today, it's get yourself an incident response plan, make sure that it works for your organisation, but also test it, make sure it evolves with the organisation as well. So I can't speak more highly about getting a plan in place. And Adam is going to have to pay a $20 fine for being on mute, I think.
Thank you, mate. Yes, $50 given that I'm the moderator. Really great point. I was saying, I might throw back to Adam. Could you give us, with your experience, an overview of a breach or an attack without mentioning any names, of course, and the consequences within the country?
It was interesting listening to Jay previously and the amount of incidences he described, and I can obviously relay that back to real life incidents which have actually happened with my client base as well. So the first one which actually came to mind was essentially a social engineering style of claim, whereby a not-for-profit I looked after made monthly payments through to a council. That invoice had been amended and the BSB and account details had been changed. When they made that payment, it went through to the attacker versus the normal place. And as a result, obviously, we're out of pocket X amount of funds. I think which I took out of that claim, listening to what Jay said as well, is that not that this would have probably prevented the cause, but is more of a risk management tool that if they would have actually contacted the provider and said, look, have you changed your account details, they could have avoided that loss occurring. So it's something as easy as that. I think the other point Jay mentioned, well, with regards to a legal firm which had an attack, we've had one occur where they almost incurred north of $2 million worth of forensic costs and negotiations and fees, in addition to 600 grand's worth of lost business. So these claims can add up very, very quickly. And they really do have a snowball effect, whereby they might have first your business is lost, customers are lost, reputation costs that can then go further into restoration of your systems, and then can also move into legal and settlement costs. So it does really blow out quickly.
Yeah, look, it's a great answer and very insightful. I think everyone on this panel, unfortunately, has either clients. We had a prospect contact us in the last 4 weeks that we presented to a year ago that had a managed service provider, and unfortunately, they were a multinational. And they contacted us because they were a recipient of after the fact that we found as a business email compromise breach, and effectively they'd been spoofed, and the cyber criminals had set up a bank out of Mexico, and these were invoices that, being a multinational, invoices of $250,000, of $500,000, and effectively a number of their clients have been contacted from what they felt was from this particular organization asking for payment of real invoices. So it showed that they're in the network of some form, and they asked us to do an incident response, some assistance. And the good news is that, the bad news for them was that a couple of their clients were thinking about going legal, saying, hold on, well, this is your problem. You've been breached. It goes back to that supply chain management. And so it probably leads me to the next question, is that a lot of organizations on this call are either going to have internal IT, as I said before, or they're going to use external providers. What can they do? What type of questions can they ask their managed services provider to ensure that they've got the protection that they think they have? What type of questions can they ask them to ensure that they've got the resilience they probably think they have that but may not have today? And that's an open question to anyone that might want to take that. I think, look, we do a lot of this, so I'm happy to take that. I think some of the questions are all around, what type, have they done a risk assessment? If you have an MSP today and they haven't offered and they're not regularly talking to you about what your top 2 to 3 risks are for your business every single month and every single quarter, then you should be asking them why they haven't done that. A lot of times we work with organizations that have IT departments. They actually have IT departments that, again, what we're starting to find is that, the way that you protect your business today, and Jay will probably agree with this, and he might want to touch more on this, is totally different to how you protected your business 2 years ago and 4 years ago. And typically what we see is those 4 pillars of traditional protection is all about, network security, patch management, firewall, backup, and a couple of other areas. They're traditional methods of protecting your business, but unfortunately they're not enough anymore. And organizations, and we deal with organizations of 2 users, and we deal with organizations of 10,000 users. The bigger ones all have IT departments. Are they certified? Are they trained? Are they up to date with ensuring that they're giving you the protection? In our experience, this is no disrespect to them. They're not. They're not, because cybersecurity is starting to become a fairly specialized field. You need a specialized set of tools. You need some training, and you need to understand that it's evolving, adapting so quickly that you need to work with a partner that continue to evolve and adapt to give you that business resilience. Do you want to touch on that at all, Jay?
Yeah, I think there's 2 areas there that jumped out at me. So first off, let's talk about your IT people, right? That they were trained and certified to deliver Azure Active Directory, Windows networking, Exchange servers. And yet here in the last 90 days, those really smart Exchange server admins, had their world turned upside down with a vulnerability that wasn't within their control initially. And Microsoft had a vulnerability and was how do I say it tactfully, didn't alert the world as fast as they probably should have, right? Which has been known to happen before because it was a bigger bear than they were prepared to battle. At the same time, one of the places where I think IT people spend zero time is on policy. If you don't have the governance right in the business and have those policies in place from the executive level, how can the company, especially the IT people, know what you expect of them from a cybersecurity perspective? So, you've got to take a leadership role as a business leader and get those pieces right. And then we'll figure out the technology. But at the end of the day, it's what we don't know and what we can't see that causes the most harm in cybersecurity. And so having a cybersecurity expert come in and spend some time looking at your network and evaluating your risk with your executive team is well worth the time.
Yeah, great answer. Questions come in from Greg Chalker. Can hackers get into a business easily through a company's IoT? An article I read on the weekend, yeah, and Jay touched on that with the Target story a little bit, right? But I read an article over the weekend, and the company name escapes me. It was a multinational that they were breached through the fish tank thermometers. I don't know if anyone read that over the weekend. They were literally breached through the fish tank thermometers that were IoT accessed and accessed externally. Do you want to touch on that, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, the one I know about when that happened was in Las Vegas, and they were actually able to gain access to some of the gaming machines because, for whatever the reason, the network design was like, hey, those fish tanks can use that network. It's not a problem because they had the best signal. And next thing you know, that they were trying to figure out how the intruder got in. And when they backtracked afterwards, because again, in hindsight, everything is 2020, they're like, oh, that was probably a really bad idea. You know, the Gaming Commission did not appreciate that one at all. There was nothing fishy about that one.
You got to laugh, right? I mean, and that's the thing, you know, so many of these things, it's just, you know, someone's doing their job, you know, they've just, you know, just haven't thought for a moment and given access. And this is how, you know, this is how thorough the criminals that we're trying to compete against are getting. Who would think to look into that? Who would look, you know, who would gain access to an organization through fish tank thermometers? It's crazy, right? Look, we've still got well over 30 attendees, but in the interest of wrapping up and everyone's time, I think we might leave it there, given that we've run over time, and I'm just very appreciative of everyone's time. So as I said, in summary, everyone that has attended that's still on here, you will be contacted to get the recording that will be sent out. You have access to getting the security risk assessment. I want to once again thank my fellow panelists, all attendees. It's been great, and particularly Jay, Adam, Dudley, Scott, and of course my fellow Cybersecurity Collective peers. Thank you all. It's been a great session. I really appreciate it, and hopefully you've got some value out of it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.